Hello, I'm Landon Schlungen, and today we're going to go through the CSS colors by building a set of colored markers. Part of FreeCodeCamp. It's part of the responsive web design portion of FreeCodeCamp. And let's get into it. My face cam is in the middle this time, so maybe that will be better. And let's get into it. Let's start this project. All right, CSS color markers. I guess we're making this thing here. Cool. As you've seen in the previous projects, web pages should start with a doctype HTML declaration followed by an HTML element. Add a doctype HTML declaration at the top of the document. So we will do that. Doctype HTML and an HTML element after that. HTML element with a lang attribute equaling to English. And in that tag, then also I'm pretty sure doctype needs a exclamation point here. Let's check that. Nice. Nest the head element within the HTML element. All right, so we want head here, like so. And we've got body element. Body. So that should be good. Sweet. Remember that the title element gives search engines extra information about the page. It also tells browsers what text to display in the title bar when the page is open and on the tab for the page. Within the head element, nest a little element with the text colored markers. Title, we need colored markers. Yeah, it should be good. I guess not. Is it because of period? Yeah, probably. There we go. Ask me later. All right, to tell browsers how to encode characters on your page, set the char set to UTF-8. So inside the head element, nest a meta element. Meta, and then jar set equals UTF-8. That should be good. Nice. Finally, use a viewport meta tag, and then set the stuff. Okay, so we want another meta tag, and then we want a viewport. Viewport, give it a name attribute of viewport. Okay, so name equals viewport, and then content equals this with device width initial scale 1.0. So let's put that in there. I think that's what they want. Try it out. Yep, it works nice. All right, now you're ready to start adding content to the page within the body. Nest an H1 element with the text CSS color markers. Nest an H1 element. Oops, H1 with CSS color markers. Slash H1. That should be good. Nice. All right, in this project, you'll work with an external CSS file to style the page. You've already created a styles.css file for you. Before you can use it, you'll need to link to the page. Nest a link to it. All right, so we need a link with a rel equaling style sheet, the style sheet, and an href equal to styles.css. That should be good. Nice. All right. Now we're in styles.css. Create a new CSS rule that targets the H1 elements and set its text align property to center. All right, so we want text align center on here. That should center our text. Nice. Beautiful. Now you'll add some elements that you'll eventually style into color markers. First, within the body, add a div element. Okay, so we need a div. Set its class attribute to container. Class equals container. And then make sure the div element is below the H1. All right. So I think that should be fine. Nice. Next, within the div, add another div element and give it a class of marker. Okay, so we want another div of class equaling marker. I think just like that. Nope. Within the div, whoops, within here, just alt that up. Okay. Nice. It's time to add some color to the page. Remember that one way to add color to an element is to use a color keyword like black, cyan, or yellow. As a reminder, here's how to target the class FreeCodeCamp. Create a new CSS rule that targets the class marker, and set its background color property to red. Background color to red. Should be good. Yep, nice. All right, notice that your marker doesn't seem to have any color. Background color is actually applied, but since the marker div element is empty, it doesn't have any height by default. In your .marker CSS rule, set the width property to 200 pixels and the height to 25 pixels. So we want width to be 200 pixels, and we want height to be 25 pixels so that it will show up. Nice. So there's our beautiful marker. That works. Your marker would look better if it was centered on the page. An easy way to do that is with the margin shorthand property. All right, so we just want margin auto. Margin auto. Now it's centered. Now that you've got one marker centered with the color, it's time to add the other markers. In the container div, add 2 more div elements and give them each a class of marker. In the container div, add 2 more of these markers. Okay, I'll shift down a couple times. So there we go. Nice. Well, you have 3 separate marker div elements. They look like one big rectangle. You should add some space between them to make it easier to see each element. All right, so we need 10 pixels auto. So 10 pixels on the Y, auto on the X. Nice. In school, you might have learned that red, yellow, and blue are primary colors and learned how to create new colors by mixing those. However, this is an outdated model. These days, there are 2 main color models, the additive RGB, red, green, blue model, used in electronic devices, and the subtractive CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black model used in print. In this project, you'll work with the RGB model. First, add the class 1 to the first marker div element. 1 to the first one here. Okay, so 1. Okay, nice. All right, next, remove the background color property and its value from the marker CSS rule. All right, so Control-Shift-K should delete that line. Nice. Next. Then create a new CSS rule that targets the class 1 and set its background color to red. So .1 background color of red. So just that one should show up. Nice. All right, add the class 2 to the second div and 3 to the third one. All right. So 2 and 3, like so. All right, and then we're going to do some different background colors for these ones, I'm guessing. So .2, we want a background color of green. And then for 3, we want a background color of blue. Background color blue. All right, beautiful. And they're showing up. Earlier, you learned that the RGB color model is additive. This means that colors begin as black and change as different colors of red, green, and blue are introduced. An easy way to see this is with the Css Rgb function. Create a new CSS rule that targets the class container. Set its background color to black, which is 000. All right, so .container. We need background color of RGB of 000. 000. All right, so there's our background color black. Nice. A function is a piece of code that can take an input and perform a specific action. That's the Css Rgb function accepts values or arguments for red, green, and blue and produces a color. First one is red, then green, then blue. Each red, green, and blue value is a number between 0 and 255. 0 means that there's 0% of that color and it's black. 255 means there's 100% of that color, and it will be white in that case. In the .1 CSS rule, replace the color keyword red with the RGB function. For the RGB function, set the value red to 255. All right, so we want RGB here. And we want 255 for the first value and then 0 for the second two. And then that will still be red. Nice. Notice that the background color for your marker is still red. This is because you set the red value of our RGB function to the max at 255 and both green and blue values to 0. Now use the RGB functions to set the other colors. Okay, so we want RGB And then 0 for red, green is 255, and 0 for blue. And then same with this one, RGB. We want 0, 0, 255 for blue. And then that should be good. Nice. While the red and blue markers look the same, the green one is much lighter than it was before. This is because the green color keyword is actually a darker shade. It is about halfway between black and the maximum value for green. So we want to set the green value in the RGB function to 127, so lower its intensity. So we want this to be 127 instead. All right, beautiful. All right, now add a little more vertical space between your markers and the edge of the container element they're in. In the .container class, use the shorthand padding property to add a 10 pixel top and bottom margin, or padding, and set the left and right padding to 0. So we want padding on top and bottom to be 10 pixels, and then 0 on the left and right. And then similar to the margin property used earlier. All right, so that should be good. Nice. In the additive RGB color model, primary colors are colors that, when combined, create pure white. For this to happen, each color needs to be at its highest intensity. Before you combine colors, set your green marker back to pure green. Right? Set green back to the max. Okay, so just do that. Beautiful. Now that you have the primary RGB colors, it's time to combine them. For the RGB function in the .container rule, set the red, green, and blue values to the max of 255. All right, so these should all be 255. Let's set that. 255. And now it's white. Nice. Secondary colors are the colors you get when you combine primary colors. You might have noticed some secondary colors in the last step as you change the red, green, and blue values. To create the first secondary color, yellow, update the RGB function in the CSS rule to combine pure red and pure green. So we want red and green to be 255, and then it will be yellow. Cool. To create the next secondary color cyan, update the RGB function in the two CSS rules to combine pure green and pure blue. So here we want green and blue to be 255, and that will be cyan. To create the final secondary color magenta, update the RGB function in the 3 to be pure blue and pure red. So we want red and blue to be 255, and it will be magenta. Cool. Next challenge. Now that you're familiar with secondary colors, you'll learn how to create tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are created by combining a primary with a nearby secondary color. To create the tertiary color orange, update the RGB function so that red is at the max value and set green to 127. Red is at the max and green should be 127 for orange. All right, cool. It's nice. Notice that to create orange, you had to increase the intensity of red and decrease the intensity of the green RGB values. This is because orange is a combination of red and yellow and falls between the two colors on the color wheel. To create the tertiary color spring green, combine cyan with green. Update RGB function so that the green is at the max value and set blue to 127. So we want blue to 127, and now it's all lighter green. And to create the tertiary color violet, we need red to be 127 and blue to be 255. All right, so this will make violet. All right, cool. There are 3 more tertiary colors, chartreuse, green, which is green plus yellow, azure, which is blue plus cyan, and rose, which is red plus magenta. Create chartreuse green, update the RGB function in 1 so that red is 127 and green is the max value. So this should be 127 and this should be 255, like that, I guess. And then for 2, we want green at 127, and then this one at its max. So I'm guessing we just flip these for all these. So this will be 255 and this will be 127. And those are the rose, azure, and chartreuse green. Now that you've gone through all the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors on the color wheel, it'll be easier to understand other color theory concepts and how they impact design. First, in the rules 1, 2, and 3, adjust the values in the RGB function so that the background color to each element is set to pure black. Remember, the RGB function uses the additive color model. Okay, so adjust the values so that It's set to pure black. So we just want all these to be 0, I guess. Okay. Select all those. Just make them black. Beautiful. A color wheel is a circle where similar colors or hues are near each other and different ones are further apart. For example, pure red is between the hues rose and orange. Two colors that are opposite from each other on the color wheel are called complementary colors. If two complementary colors are combined, they produce gray. But when they are placed side by side, these colors produce strong visual contrast and appear brighter. In the RGB function for the one CSS rule, set the red value to the max for pure red. Okay, so this should be 255. Set the values of green and blue to the max of 255 to produce cyan. So we want these to be 255 and 255 for cyan. All right, and that looks pretty good. It's better practice to choose one color as the dominant color and use its complementary color as an accent to bring attention to certain content on the page. First, in the H1 rule, use the RGB function to set its background color to cyan. Okay, so we want the H1 background color to be cyan, RGB of 0, 255, 255, like so. Nice. Next, in the one rule, use the RGB function to set the background color to black. Okay, so we want this to be black, and in the 2, use it to set to red. So we want this to be red instead, I guess. We're just changing colors all over the place, I suppose. Kind of weird, but whatever. Oh, yay, so beautiful. Notice how your eyes are naturally drawn to the red color in the center. When designing a site, you can use this effect to draw attention to important headings, buttons, or links. There are several other important color combinations outside of complementary colors, but you'll learn those a bit later. For now, use the RGB function in the .to rule to set the background color to black. All right, to set the black. All right. And in the H1 rule, remove the background color property. So Control-Shift-K, remove that line. All right. Now it's time to add other details to the markers, starting with the first one. In the first marker div element, change the class 1 to red. Change this to red. Sure. Update the .1 class to be red. All right, so this will be red. And update the RGB function so that its red value is the max. All right. Next, change the class 2 to green and 3 to blue. Okay, so same things here. So we want this to be green, 3 to be blue, and then we want to update these ones to be green and blue, and then we're going to update the RGB values next. Yes, so green we want to be different. Very common way to apply color to an element with CSS is with hexadecimal or hex values. While hex values sound complicated, they're really just another form of RGB values. Hex color values start with a hashtag character and take 6 characters from 0 to 9, A through F. The first pair of characters represent red, the second pair represent green, the third pair represent blue. All right, so that, yep, RGB. And in the green CSS rule, set the background color property to hex color code value 00 FF00. All right, so this should instead be hex 00 FF00, and that will be green. So same as RGB, FF is a stand-in for 255, and 00 is a stand-in for 0. You may already be familiar with decimal or base 10 values, which go from 0 to 9. Hexadecimal or base 16 values go from 0 to 9, then A through F. With hex colors, 0 is 0% of that color, and FF is 100%, so 00FF00 translates to 0% red, 100% green, 0% blue, is the same as RGB 02550. Lower the intensity of green by setting green value of the hex color to 7F. So we just want this to be 7F. And that will be basically 127, I guess. Hsl Color Model or hue, saturation, lightness is another way to represent colors. CSS Hsl function accepts 3 values, a number from 0 to 360 for hue, a percentage from 0 to 100 for saturation, and a percentage from 0 to 100 for lightness. If you imagine a color wheel, the hue of red is at 0 degrees, green is at 120 degrees, and blue is at 240. Saturation is the intensity of a color from 0% or gray to 100% for pure color. Lightness is how bright a color appears from 0% to complete black to 100% complete white, with 50% being neutral. In the blue CSS rule, use the Hsl function to change the background color property to pure blue. Set the hue to 240, right, hue to 240, saturation to 100, and lightness to 50%. All right, I did it wrong. Hue, saturation, lightness. Oh, I think I need percent signs in here, actually. No, set the hue to 240. Oh, I have to do HSL. That's why. HSL. Hey, there we go. There's blue. All right, you've learned a few ways to set flat colors in CSS, but you can also use a color transition or gradient on an element. A gradient is when one color transitions into another. The CSS linear gradient function lets you control the direction of the transition along a line in which colors are used. One thing to remember is that the linear gradient function actually creates an image element and is usually paired with the background property, which can accept an image as a value. In the .red CSS rule, change the background color property to background. So this just should be background, first of all. And then we want to add this linear gradient function here. Gradient direction is the direction of the line used for the transition. Color 1 and color 2 are color arguments, which are the colors that will be used in the transition itself. These can be any type of color, including color keywords, Hex, RGB, or HSL. Now you'll apply red to green gradient along a 90-degree line to the first marker. First, in the .red CSS rule, set the background property to linear gradient and pass it the value 90 degrees as the gradient direction. So we want linear gradient, and we want 90 degrees. And then they just want that for now, I think. So I can get rid of that color. Yep, that's what they want for now. All right. Use the RGB function to set the first color argument to pure red. Okay, yeah, that's what I had. 255.00. Okay, beautiful. Next. All right, you won't see gradient yet because the linear gradient function needs at least 2 color arguments to work. Use the RGB function to set the second color argument to pure green. So RGB, and then so 0 on red, green is 255, and blue is 0. Oh, look at that. It's so ugly. It's so ugly. As you can see, the linear gradient function produced a smooth red-green gradient. While the linear gradient function needs a minimum of 2 colors to work, it can actually accept many color arguments. Add a pure blue as a third argument. All right, so we want blue at the end. So RGB of 0, 0, 255. And then now it goes from red, green to blue. Cool. Color stops allow you to fine-tune where colors are placed along the gradient line. They are a length unit with pixels or percentages that follow a color in the linear gradient function. For example, in this red-black gradient, the transition from red to black takes place at the 90% point along the gradient line. So red takes up most of the available space. All right. In the linear gradient function, add a 75% color stop after the first red color elements. Okay, so we need just 75% here. And then it will take up most of the space. Yeah, looks okay. Looks like it does. All right, now that you know the basics of how the linear gradient function and color stops work, you can use them to make the markers look more realistic. In the linear gradient function, set gradient direction to 180 degrees. All right, we want this to be 180 degrees, like so. All right, next set the color stop for red to 0%. All right, and for green to 50%, and then blue to 100%, I guess. See what this looks like. All right, so there's that. And it's not passing. Set the color stop to green for 50%. Oh, this has outside of there. I need it inside. 100%. All right, I think that should work. Nice. All right, now that the color stops are set, you'll apply different shades of red to each color argument in the linear gradient function. The shades on the top and bottom edge of the marker will be darker, while the ones in the middle will be lighter, as if there's a light above it. For the first color argument, which is currently pure red, update the RGB function so the value for red is 122, 74, and 14. All right, so this should be 74 and 14. 74, 14. Right? Should be good. Now modify the second color argument to be 245, 62, 113. All right, so this one should be 245, 62, and 113. All right, so there's that lighter red, and then this will be another dark red. Okay, so 162, 27, and 27 looks like. All right, so there's that. Oh, look at that marker. It's looking a lot more pretty now. The red marker is looking much more realistic. Now you'll do the same for the green marker using a combination of linear gradient functions and hex colors. In the green CSS rule, change the background color property to background. All right, so yeah, we're going to do the same thing for these ones, looks like. All right, and then we want linear gradient here. Linear gradient. And then we want to be 180 degrees. And then we want hex. Wait, no, use a hex color code. Oh, yeah, we want hex. Okay. So we're going to use 55, 68, and 0D for that first color. All right, the second color is going to be 71. So hashtag 71, 5, and 3E. All right, so there's the second color. Third color will be 11, 60, and 31. So hashtag 11, 60, and 31. Whoop, 31. All right, sweet. There's our green marker. Even without the color stops, you might have noticed that the colors for the green marker transition at the same point as the red marker. The first color is at the start, and the second is middle, and the third is 100%. The linear gradient function automatically calculates these values for you and places colors evenly along the gradient line by default. In the red CSS, we'll remove 3 color stops. All right, remove 0%, remove 50%, and remove 100%. It's easy enough. That should be good. If no gradient direction argument is provided to the linear gradient function, it arranges colors from top to bottom or along a 180-degree line by default. Clean up your code a little more by removing the gradient direction argument from both. Okay, so we don't need the linear gradient argument, I guess, because that's default of up and down. Now you'll apply gradient to the blue marker, this time using Hsl functions. So we want background. And now we're going to use Hsl functions for this. All right, so we want linear gradient, and then we want HSL 186, 76% saturation, and then 16% lightness. All right, so there's the first color. It's kind of a cool blue. All right, next one, we want HSL of 223, 90%, and 60%. All right, should be good. Next one is 240, HSL of 240, 56%, and 42%. All right, so that should be good. All right, step 70. Now that the markers have the correct colors, it's time to build the marker sleeve. Start with the red marker. Inside the red marker div, create a new div and give it a class of sleeve. So we want a div of class sleeve inside of here. All right, easy enough. Here's our sleeve. Create a new CSS rule that targets a class sleeve. So we want dot sleeve, and then we want a height on it and a width. So width of 110 pixels and a height of 25 pixels. Nothing really showing yet because we didn't add a background color. Right, so we want background color to be white. Yeah, give the sleeve a transparent white color. Actually, by default, it's transparent like this. That's why we have to add white for it to actually show up, like the change. Opacity describes how opaque or non-transparent something is. For example, solid wall is opaque and no light can pass through, but a drinking glass is much more transparent and you can see through the glass to the other side. With the CSS opacity property, you can control how opaque or transparent an element is. With the value 0 or 0%, the element will be completely transparent, and at 1.0 or 100%, the element will be completely opaque like it is by default. In the sleeve, CSS will set the opacity property to 0.5. All right, opacity to 0.5, so it'll be partially see-through. That's kind of cool. All right, another way to set the opacity for an element is with the alpha channels. Similar to the opacity property, the alpha channel controls how transparent or opaque color is. All right, remove the opacity property and value. And we're going to be adding an alpha value here soon. Yep, so we're going to do RGB 000 and then RGB EA actually because for alpha, which is the see-through of it. So we want 255 for white and then see-through of 0.5. And that is the same thing as opacity of 0.5 plus white. Your sleeve is looking good, but it would look even better if it was positioned more towards the right side of the marker. One way to do that is to add another element before the sleeve to push it to the right. Add a new div with the class of cap. So we want div class equaling cap before that one. All right. Easy enough. All right, step 77, create a new CSS rule to target the class cap. So we want cap. We want width of 60 pixels, height of 25 pixels. Okay. It looks like your sleeve disappeared, but don't worry, it's still there. What happened is that your new cap div is taking up the entire width of the marker and is pushing the sleeve down to the next line. Oh. This is because the default display property for div elements is blocks, so when two block elements are next to each other, they stack like actual blocks. For example, your marker elements are all stacked on top of each other. To position two div elements on the same line, set their display properties to inline block. Create a new rule to target both cap and sleeve classes. So I'm going cap and sleeve, and I think we need a comma between them. And then we want display of inline block on these block. All right, so there we go. In the last project, you learned a little bit about borders and the border color property. All HTML elements have borders, though they're usually set to none by default. With CSS, you can control all aspects of an element's border and set the border on all sides or just one side at a time. For a border to be visible, you need to set its width and style. In the sleeve, CSS will add the border left width property with the value 10 pixels. Okay, so just border left width of 10 pixels. Okay, so there's no border showing up yet because we didn't add a color. And also style, which should be solid. Border left style. Style should be solid. And then we're going to give it a background color as well. Oh, I guess right now it's black by default. And then we want it to be black. Okay, so it is by default, but we're going to add it anyways. Left color of black. All right, beautiful. The border left shorthand property lets you set the left borders with style and color at the same time. So here we can just do border left and then combine all three of these. All right, so we're going to go border left, and then we're going to add 10 pixels solid black. And that's going to be the same thing, so I can get rid of these three properties here, which I can do with Control-Shift-K. Nice. All right, your marker is looking good, but to make it look even more realistic, you can change the border style to double solid borders. For the border left shorthand property, change the border style from solid to double. All right, so we want this to be double. Hey, that looks pretty cool. The black color of your border looks pretty harsh against the more transparent sleeve. You can use an alpha channel lower the opacity to use RGBA. So RGBA, then we want 0, 0, 0, and then 0.75. All right, there we go. Awesome, your red marker is looking good. Now all you need to do is add the caps and sleeves to your other markers. Add a cap and sleeve to both the green and blue markers. You can just copy the div elements from red and paste them in. All right, so we'll just copy these here. Shift, Alt Shift down, Alt down. I think that's in there. Alt Shift down, down. There we go. So beautiful. Added cap and sleeves to all three of them, and it looks good. Step 86, the last thing you'll do is add a slight shadow to each marker to make them look even more realistic. The box shadow property lets you apply one or more shadows around an element. Here's a basic syntax: box shadow offset X, offset Y color. Start by adding a simple shadow to the red marker. In the red class, we want box shadow, and then we want 5 pixels, and red. Okay, cool. As you can see, you added a simple red shadow around your marker. That's 5 pixels to the right and 5 pixels down. But what if you wanted to position your shadow on the opposite side? You can do that by using negative values for offset X and offset Y. Update the values for the box shadow to be -5 and -5. Easy enough. Now it's up there. Notice that the edges of the shadow are sharp. This is because there is an additional blur radius value for the box shadow property. So blur radius goes between color and offset Y. If a blur radius value isn't included, it defaults to 0 and produces sharp edges. The higher the value for blur radius, the greater the blurring effect is. In the green CSS rule, add the box shadow property, and then add that. All right, so box shadow, and we want 5 pixels, and then we want 5 pixels for blur radius, and then green for the color. And there it shows up. Looks a lot better than the red. But what if you wanted to expand the shadow up further? You can do that with the optional spread radius function, or value. That goes between blur radius and color. Like blur radius, spread radius defaults to 0 if it is included. Practice by adding a 5 pixel shadow directly around the blue marker. All right, so we want shadow on this. We want 0, 0, or 0, 0. Blur radius of 5 pixels and blur radius of 0 as well. And 5 pixels for spread and blue for color. So there we go. Now that you're familiar with the box shadow property, you can finalize the shadow, starting with the one for the red marker. We want it to be 0, 0, offset 0, 0, then 20. Okay, so 0, 0, then 20 for blur radius. Oops. 20 for blur radius and 0 for spread, and then red. Okay, so that's what it looks like. All right, next part is going to be the green one, right? No. Replace the named color with the RGBA function. Use the values 83. Okay, so we just need a RGBA here. We want 83, 14, 14, and 0.8 see-through. All right, so there's our background, our box shadow. The shadows for your green and blue markers will have the same position, blur, and spread. The only difference will be the colors. All right, so green and blue will be the same thing. It's going to be 0, 0, 20, and then 0. And then the same with these ones, so 0, 0, 20, and then 0. All right, let's try that. Yippee. For the green markers box shadow property, replace the name color with the hex color code. So we want hex here, 3B, 7E, 7E, and 20. All right, and CC for alpha. So if you add CC at the end of that, that becomes the alpha. So mostly opaque. Finally, for the blue marker's box shadow property, replace the named color with Hsl function. All right, so we want Hsl here. So we want 223 for hue, 59% for saturation, and 31% for brightness, and then 0.8 for see-through for alpha. Yippee! Hey, we did it. Next, we're going to build a registration form, which I already did in one of my previous videos for HTML. Otherwise, that was it. Let's see the curriculum now. See if we completed it. Looks like we did. Learned CSS, and we did all 94 of those little challenges. So anyways, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give the video a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'll read the comments, and I'll see you later. Bye.